Hello, it's me, Jess. Welcome to my channel. I'm here with another channeled message. This is a specific message. It might resonate with you, it might not. All right, so in this message, I'm very strongly picking up on the energy of fantasy. And I feel like Spirit has a thing or two that it wants to say about fantasy in particular, because it is some kind of cornerstone of the karmas that are being worked out here. Definitely between two people. And I also just heard, I'm not saying that they're not soulmates, okay? But there's fantasy here that needs to get like cleaned up. And I just saw a vacuum like come in and just kind of vacuum out all of the sticky kind of gunky kind of fantasy. Now, if you've listened to my channel, you know, sometimes whenever I see like the energy of karma, it comes through like a sticky tar, like hot in the sun, very uncomfortable. You can definitely see kind of where it is, but it also feels almost impossible to like rid yourself of. But this is more coming across like a clear, sticky gel almost. The energy of this fantasy. And it's weird because I feel like that the clearness of it gives you the impression that you can see through something, or that it is clear. So something here is like transparent, but actually the sticky and the tackiness of it is like making it clouded, you know, and the more you touch it, the more like clouded it gets. There's something here like that. But anyways, like I was saying, I feel like fantasy has been the cornerstone upon which a house has been built here. And I don't know what the house is. It's like a relationship, or I just heard the word structure. It's like maybe a thought structure, but I think this goes to like past lives. So there is like a relationship here, and it feels like it transcends like multiple lifetimes, but it's been built on this like lie. And Spirit is showing me different words that I can switch in and out for fantasy here. One is a lie, you know. The other one that they're using is frame. A fantasy can be a kind of frame because it provides an alternative storyline. It connects the dots in a different way than objective reality would connect the dots. And therefore, it provides some kind of context. And the context is kind of like the scaffolding, you know, or it's like the structure, the bones. Oh, and I just heard that that song, The House Don't Fall When the Bones Are Good. And it feels to me like there's a house that's been built here and the bones are not good. What's strange is that I feel this is actually a soulmate connection. And it's not that they're telling you not to build it. They're just telling you it has to be built on a solid foundation and it has to be built the right way. Now, I feel like both people here, and there's more than just two people involved in this situation karmically that have kind of been sucked into some kind of fantasy. And the fantasy might be ever so slightly different depending on people's vantage points in order to, I just heard manufacture consent. In order to manufacture consent of each of these people kind of interacting with this space, each one of them is told, or either they tell themselves, and that's the karmas that everybody's kind of drawn in here. They have a karma to do with like fantasy. But another word that they're giving me for fantasy now is denial. It's a way that they're kind of holding themselves in the prison of denial. And I'm flashing back to the live stream where I was talking about these past lives that I always see you guys like in the river, right? Like at the bottom of the river, like how did you end up at the bottom of the river? And the implication there is like, you know, it was through some kind of sudden like ending energy, and it wasn't good, and it was like this ambushing kind of energy. And then our guides collectively kind of like made it the like denial joke, like you're in the river of denial. And remember, we all kind of groaned and like laughed at that. So it's like denial is how you ended up at the bottom of the river, where you were ambushed or the rug was pulled out from under you. And being at the bottom of the river, I'm feeling like a lot of pressure on my chest, like the pressure of being under a lot of water. But also water is like, you could have been underwater in a house, literally, like where the house, like what you owe it on a house is, oh my gosh. So they're saying karmically, they're drawing a metaphor to that. Because remember I said, there's been like a structure built here on top of this cornerstone of fantasy. Yeah, it's like you're underwater in the house is what I'm getting. Underwater meaning like you owe more on the house than what it's worth. So if you wanted to sell it, you could get money from it, but you still would owe on it. You'd still have to like figure out how to come up, like make up the difference, you know? And it feels like maybe that's kind of the situation here. There could be money involved, but also it feels like just being under the pressure of all of these emotions. And it's hard to kind of sort through. And so the fantasy itself is kind of like a devil energy where in the short term, it seems to solve the problems. And that's like when you're in the situation. So this is, where Spirit has tried to send some type of wake up call. And I do feel Spirit has been involved here. There's like definitely hand of God kind of energy. And what Spirit is saying is, look, this is the karmas that you chose to kind of face and try to dismantle and awaken from in this lifetime. Like as a soul, you're ready for this. So we've been assisting, right? And we agreed, I'm hearing that, we agreed that we would do it as gently as possible. But the very act of like waking up from a fantasy is shocking in and of itself, because the lay of the land that you thought you were operating in isn't the actual lay of the land. And it's jarring because you've been navigating this landscape, because I'm seeing somebody like blindfolded, and I'm seeing them actually walking like in a landscape. But the imagery that you have in your mind about what this landscape looks like, so you're confident in your steps, it's not at all the landscape that you've been navigating in. And I think there's a bit of this like shock factor of like, oh my gosh, this has been so dangerous, because I was moving one way because I thought one thing. And I just heard the word set up. Like, I think some of you feel like you are set up to be in this dangerous situation. And the shock is kind of like, I think it's because you thought that you were loved. And this could be in a romantic situation or even a platonic one. Because like I said, I feel like this involves a lot of people. And I also think that I'm hearing two things can be true. Like I do think that there is love here, but there's also like selfishness. And I feel like you're just kind of up against people. Like I'm hearing a neediness, a desperation for them to believe something about themselves that's not true in order to cope. It's like I'm hearing copium, like in order to cope with what they've done, with who they are. And it doesn't necessarily make them a bad person. I just think that there's something here. Again, I'm hearing that like underwater term, of like being underwater in the house. Like there's something about this lie or this fantasy where they're so far underwater in it that they can't really come up for air. And that air thing, air is like the truth, it's like in this, and it's like refreshing, kind of like if you're thirsty in the desert, a drink of water would be refreshing. But I feel the refreshing aspect here is you've been underwater and you're suffocating and you need oxygen. And that oxygen, I'm really seeing the Ace of Swords in my mind. It's like the truth that kind of cuts through, and you just need that gasp of like fresh air. But I think people have been keeping you kind of underwater because they have their own stuff to face about themselves and about how maybe they were benefiting from this. I feel like denial is what I'm getting, denial. And I think some of the denial here with some of the people involved, it's a very personal denial about themselves. They can't face something that they did. Oh yeah, like I just cold-bloodedly cheated on my partner. I knew it was wrong. I had a lustful feeling. And so instead they create this fantasy narrative around it to cope. And so some of it is like kind of now that's just an example. Okay. But you could have been betrayed or taken advantage of here in any number of ways. And somebody would have had to make that make sense to themselves, other than I was selfish. I wanted what I wanted and I did what I did, because then if that's the reality, then the next leap in their mind is people should treat me a certain way. I understand that I'm ostracized, that somebody's got to draw a hard boundary with me, that the fault lies with me, that it's not fixable through just having a conversation. I need to kind of figure myself out. What led me to do this? Why didn't I care about like the effects of this? So for some, that denial is very personal. And for others, I think they're in denial. Like I know that I'm hearing that Selena Gomez song, The Heart Wants What It Wants. And she's like, I know him though. And I know what he wouldn't do to hurt me. And you want to believe that love is enough. And you want to believe that love means that you are safe. But love is but one emotion that we can all have. And I think here, love butted up against someone's selfishness, someone's lustfulness, and their desirous nature that they would not keep in check. They don't have the strength. They don't have the personal discipline. So in lieu of that, a fantasy was built between the two of you. And this feels like the karma between the two of you. And again, just because there is fantasy here doesn't mean that you're not soulmates, because I definitely think there's a lot of karmics here. And just so we are clear, like my kind of definition of the way that I use soulmates and karmics now is because I think that every relationship we're in has like karmic elements, and soulmate elements. And, if you take it far enough, I think we're all kind of soulmates. But, it doesn't mean that we're all meant to be near one another in each other's lives the same way that like if you're a liver cell, you should probably be in the liver, because that's where you're going to function, and your instincts and stuff, like it's going to make sense if you are in the liver cell. But if you're a brain cell, you should probably be in the brain, because if you're a brain cell and you're hanging out in the liver, then you're going to get very confused about who you are and what you're supposed to be doing, and you're going to be like, well, I think I'm wrong, when really you're meant to do the things that you're meant to do. It's just you got to be in the right place to do it. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense. It's kind of like Buddy the Elf, who's like at the North Pole. And maybe it's part of his journey to be at the North Pole for a while, but he obviously doesn't belong there. And then he's got to like go on this journey of self-discovery. So, we all have our own journeys, and all of that is like very valid. But so the difference to me, like between soulmate and karmic, is like, well, when you learn your spiritual lessons in any of these dynamics, karmics, I think if you genuinely learn your spiritual lesson, you'll go your separate ways. You'll realize this isn't a match. This is not a fit. We're meant to go our separate ways. Soulmates, when you learn your spiritual lesson, it's kind of like, well, shit, I do think that we're kind of supposed to be together or around each other, or we're supposed to be a part of each other's lives. But I think there's some changes that need to occur here to make this a safe, productive, healthy space for both of us. And neither of us should be expected to engage in this space if it's not safe and if it's not healthy, and if both of us are not doing like our individual work and not just pretending to. So that's the karma of fantasy here. And like I said, I think that there's a lot of people involved here, even the pulling in of karmics to support, to be like the structural support of somebody's like narrative here that I feel like has been a fantasy. And that can be on either side, right? Because if you are convincing yourself of a fantasy about your partner, well, you might bring in some like karmic friends, shall we say, that are working through their own like soul lessons, but they are unable maybe to confront certain things about their own situation. And so maybe you guys are in very similar dynamics. And so they're like, no, I think that it's okay. And I think you should continue to interact with this fantasy, right? And it doesn't make people necessarily like bad people at their core. It just, we're all scared is kind of what I'm getting. We're all scared to confront certain things about life and about reality. And so we do things to cope, and we do things to kind of ease the blow. And I feel like that's kind of what's going on here. And I do think Spirit has even participated in that, where Spirit has kind of given little nudges and little patterns to kind of help you and assist you in kind of slowly, I'm seeing like a slow dawn, of like gathering little bits and facts, piecing together some kind of pattern of like a tapestry of like, okay, this is what this is. Because I think somebody here, and there could be, take this message however it's resonating, because you could have a little bit of both, right? Where there's self-deception, but also you've been deceived by somebody else, and you were eager to believe that because then you didn't have to confront something. That's what it feels like. It could be like a mixture of both here, but yeah, I think that it's meant to wake you up to a dance that you've been participating in that leads to you being in some kind of dangerous situation. And part of that is not navigating in the actual real landscape. And it does set you up for this like Jenga tower moment where you're going to pull on the wrong little stick of wood, you're going to pull on the wrong thing and everything's going to come crashing down. So the way that this is being shown in my mind is, remember Anastasia, the cartoon Anastasia? And she's an orphan and she's like trying to find her way home, just like all of us, we're just little salmons jumping up the river trying to find God, and that's another thing is like, God is not this person. Like maybe some of you were kind of worshiping a person, or like the schmegsual energy or something. Like it feels like lust, but it feels like it's kind of coming through a person. I don't know. Something here like that. And God is in all of us, but like the totality of God and like the experience of that is something different. And again, I think that's that soulmate energy where it's like, hey, going my way. Are you a salmon jumping up this river? Cool. I feel stronger around you. So when I go to jump upstream, I do that better when I'm with you. And we're both going towards God together, right? Whereas with a karmic, I'm seeing things like thread getting like very quickly kind of knotted up and intermingled and distracted and just all consumed and like taken in by whatever this like fantasy is and like the emotions of it and things like that. So anyways, getting back to this like fantasy though, and what I think Spirit's trying to help us understand. So that Anastasia movie, right? There's that scene where she's on the boat. They're on some kind of boat. I don't know that movie very well, but it's in the middle of this like the Arctic cold sea, and it's very tumultuous. The boat is being like rocked back and forth, and she starts having this dream, and it's a beautiful dream. But in the dream, she was like in a grassy knoll. The sun was shining. They have their summer clothes on. Her family, it was there, and of course they died. She was on this like lookout for family. That might be something significant here, where this seemed like family and it felt like home. And one thing that I've learned for myself is if you come from a place where home wasn't necessarily safe, that's kind of a yellow flag of just like eyes up, look alive kind of a thing. Like just because this feels like home, that might mean that it's comforting and familiar, but not necessarily safe. So that's just another thing here. It could have felt like family. It could have felt like, oh, this is like where I belong, or like it was the answer or something. But as she's like she thinks she's moving more and more towards her family. She thinks that she's playing with her family. And so every step that she takes in the very real world where she's on this rickety boat and it's in the frigid cold, she thinks she's on this grassy knoll and it's sunny and everything's safe and playful and there's no dangers around her and she's stepping confidently. And so one wrong move, and that's obviously what Rasputin character was trying to get her to do. He was trying to get her to jump off the boat into the cold, frigid ice, and he lured her with the kind of fantasy of it. And so if she had done that, which she didn't in the movie, thank goodness, but if she had, that moment where she hit the water is going to be that tower moment where it shocks you back to reality. And you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? You know, and you're probably like shocked or frozen, in pain, and like you're off the boat now, you know, you're kind of in deep water, you're in a negative situation. And so that's the danger of fantasy. That's why it's like this devil energy and it's not actually helpful. It can be like, I don't know, because they're showing me like they're showing me microdosing, like to get yourself out of a situation, but you have to know in the background that it's like getting yourself out of the situation. And I just saw somebody in like a war-torn thing where it's like, oh my gosh, there's no way out of this. And they kind of tell themselves this little fantasy as they're working towards like the border of some kind of helpful land, you know? And then once they get on the other side of that line, they can just be like, whew, and then like actually process the level of danger that they were in. But they're showing me like microdosing, and they're also showing me that's like, it doesn't ever cloud. Like, you know, that you're getting off the whatever train you're on, like you're getting off of it, you know? So they're saying like they don't ever want to demonize any energy. It serves some kind of function. Our ego defense mechanisms, which denial is one, it's there for a reason, especially times when it can just be so overwhelming. And I think this might have been it. And it's either because for some of you, I feel like this person, and it feels like a masculine energy to be honest, was presented as a rescuer, because whether he meant to or not, like your brain, and this could have been your part of it where you were setting up the fantasy where maybe you did need a rescuer, maybe you felt alone. I'm kind of hearing family, you know, as well, where you were in some kind of precarious position or you were on a quest or something and you thought, here's somebody that's going to walk beside me, or like that's going to provide me some kind of safety and some kind of structure. And I think this person kind of set up that illusion because again, this masculine, somebody here like knowingly, I think on some level set up this fantasy. And I think maybe part of their fantasy that they had about themselves is that it wasn't harmful, because I don't think this person was necessarily like, I'm intending to cause you harm. I think they have a selfishness. I think they intended to hide certain things and get away with certain things. Maybe they had a plan to navigate themselves like out of a situation in themselves, or they could have lied to themselves and said, okay, they knew that they were one way is what I'm getting. And now I'm hearing reaction formation, which is another ego defense mechanism. I've been hearing those two very strongly in the messages, denial and reaction formation. So reaction formation is when you or somebody pretends to have a different set of values or like a different opinion than they actually have. And they do that to kind of throw somebody off of their scent. And they can do that consciously, or they can do that subconsciously, like unconsciously. And I think there's a little bit going on here, like with this masculine, or possibly even like on your side of things. But I feel like he presented like the emperor, like that he had like values around that, maybe of being monogamous or being traditional. And I think he lied to himself and was like, well, now because I found my person, like I'm going to get there. I'm just not there yet. And I can see here that there's some type of karmic relationship with a friend, and that could have been you. Y'all could have started off as friends, but there's somebody else here. There's some kind of, and I think it leads to some type of ending. And there is karma shaping up here in the offing, because he needs to overcome his fantasy about himself that what he's doing is doing no harm. And so I'm hearing like what they don't know won't hurt them. He thinks he's protecting you with this fantasy, but he won't let you go is the thing. He won't admit to himself, well, I'm not the person. I know very clearly. That's what I think has gone on here. I know very clearly who that woman is. She's made it clear to me, like in her speech, I don't want to be involved in a third party situation. I want a monogamous relationship. I want something that's going to lead somewhere. I want something stable. I want something safe. I want something committed for me and my children that will come through in the future. That's what I'm looking for. So if that's not you, don't waste my time. And this man didn't do that. And he didn't do that because I think he told himself, I'm going to say this lie whilst I get myself in position, because I'm dictating that I am the perfect person for this feminine, or that I'm Or maybe the feminine did this to this masculine. But the reason it's coming through as the emperor is, for most of you, I think it is because it is the masculine here, where he kind of set up this fantasy. And that's his version too, I think, of being a man. I just heard, be a man, you must be swift as a coursing river. And that's another Disney movie. So again, like, you know, the indoctrination of like a culture. And I think that's what's going on here too, is that he knows there's some kind of cultural impact here, or like information that's come through that, oh, he needs to be the emperor. And this could have been when he was like young, you know, in the journey, or instead of using the strategic mind that he does have to get himself to the actual embodiment of being whatever this emperor is, you know, upholding traditions and the values that his culture wants him to hold, or to see, to even see if that's who he is. I think he used it to create a fantasy about himself, you know, in order to protect himself and his ego, his fragile ego. I just heard all of this is in defense of his ego. Of course, flip it if you need to, but all of this is in defense of his ego. And that's not the lie he's telling himself. He's telling himself, oh, I am sincere. I'm going to get myself into position here. I just need to partake in this for a little bit longer. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. I need to close out these kind of chapters or whatever, or I'm a young man. So, or I'm a successful man. And so therefore I deserve And we disagree on that. He knows you disagree on that. Is he respecting you and giving you your option? No. Instead, he concocts this like fantasy here, and he can enter and exit the fantasy at will, because it's a structure. It's a mental structure. Although, he's bringing into the physical, and there may well be something to do with like a home, or like actual property or something, where it feels like he wants to like own the life that you live, you know? So it could be some kind of traditional thing, you know, where you've been kind of convinced to like give up your power, your standing, trust me, you know, and I'm well-intentioned, and part of him is well-intentioned, but this is a man who can't hold himself accountable. He doesn't believe in self-discipline. He doesn't believe that a man above all else should control himself first, towards higher aims. He doesn't believe that, and he doesn't live that. He just thinks he should be in control because he's a man, and that may be part of the ethos that this culture kind of teaches him. But he built this structure, and it is a structure of the mind between the two of them. And I do feel that a feminine here has left this structure. I do think so. And there's like a death card energy kind of hovering over this. And the death card that I'm looking at here in this deck, it's, you know, this figure dressed as like death with a big black cloak and is holding the sword of truth here. And there's a cord, and it's like just a rope here. So this isn't like a golden cord or anything. It's just a rope here. And this death energy is going to cut it, or did cut it. But the death figure here is like surrounded by fog. And it's kind of, I'm hearing like, you tell her or I will, you know, because this fantasy needs to come undone. And I kind of think that this coupledom that I'm picking up on here, there's a genuine soulmate connection. It's just buried under thick layers of fog and smog and fantasy. And all of that needs to come crashing down and crumbled. And I just heard like excavated, but again, I'm seeing this like vacuum, like spirits coming in with a vacuum to like vacuum it all up in order to see the actual truth, the actual landscape of, wait a second, this is a rickety boat. Everything is cold. I don't have shoes on. Like, you know, it's those kinds of things where you're like, I am not in a safe situation, and I need to be moving in the opposite direction. I don't need to be moving towards the edge of the boat like I have been. I now, because I've come crashing into reality, I realize I got to go into the boat. I got to go back to the bed. I got to get my feet warm. You know, I got to dry off. I got to, you know, cry or just rock back and forth. You know, like the path forward changes when you're acquainted with the truth. And I feel that this masculine is very angry. I feel like he wants to kind of maneuver over to this. And keep in mind, the genders here could be flipped, or they could be shared in some way, because I think the feminine bought into this fantasy because it was comforting, you know, or it felt familiar. So maybe this is like a family thing of, again, like for a lot of people who grow up in toxic family dynamics, it's like especially if you're the scapegoat child or like the truth teller, you're never allowed to kind of break the fourth wall and be like, you're miserable too, right? To like one of your siblings or something, you know, you're, whoever like the narcissist is, or like the family structure in general, you know, you're not ever allowed to say, I have a different theory about family and what family should feel like and what families should do for each other. And it's more service. I know for me, I grew up in like a very controlling family, and it was like very do as I say, not as I do, because I said so. Like it was very much that. And I'm lucky that I had other influences in my life that took time to like, and my mom in particular was actually very good at explaining things to me. Like in a respectful way of like, I'm a young person that needed to understand how the world around me worked. She was like very good at that. She was a teacher, you know? So she had that kind of quality. My dad, not so much. It was very controlling. It was like, do as I say, not as I do. And something about that, you might have felt with this masculine that it's not your job to pry, you know? And, I think with a healthy person, that's, you can have your privacy. And I think there are certain things that you should be private about, but I think something here, there was like holes in the story or, and we'll kind of get down to what I think happened here. But I think this feminine, the truth energy here is like the being energy. So this feminine, I think, moved away. And there is this kind of death energy of like, and for me, the death card is, well, it is scorpionic energy. And I am like strongly getting Anurata, which Anurata is somebody who can, you're probably sick of hearing me say this, but it's like they can get sucked into abusive relationship dynamics, probably because there's an underpinning of a fantasy that needs to be popped about a family structure and what's going on. But so like that underlying pattern, where fantasy has been used against this person, this feminine, I think in her own mind, but there's this death energy of like, she gets sucked into these abusive relationship dynamics that are very emotional and very like intertwining and just so deep, you know, but will pull themselves out of it. Anurata will pull themselves out of it. And so they develop an immense internal strength, and they have this kind of nobody's fool energy, and they become the lighthouse on the hill of like, hey, there are rocks over there, you know? And I feel like somebody here is like in the process of doing that, but there's still this kind of like cling energy with the death card, because there always is with Scorpio. I don't know. And like before they go over that Gandanta point from Scorpio into Sagittarius, there's the real resistance. There's like the cling, and it's because it's all kind of power dynamics and psychological, and like psychology is strongly controlled by the subconscious, you know, and making the subconscious. That's why making the subconscious conscious is such an imperative part of the spiritual journey, because you start to realize what's actually holding you back, and what's holding you back is because you don't want to like confront these like certain things. But this feminine, I feel like, is doing that, and she's moving into this Ace of Pentacles energy. Maybe has taken some kind of leap of faith, some kind of new beginning. Maybe she's got to downsize into a smaller house, or she's not having as much money, or she's doing things on her own, but she seems in good spirits. She seems like really happy, but there's this sun energy that's pulling on her. And there is like this underlying questioning, or this underlying anxiety. Because I just heard that song too. Anxiety keeps on trying me. But now I go back to the death card, that scorpionic energy again of like making the subconscious conscious. I think that's what she's doing. She's dipping into her fears. And I think she's going over the details here. And that could be even of like practical things like, okay, I have this much money in my bank account. I have this many goals, you know, or something like that. But there is this kind of sun energy, and it feels light and it feels bright, and that feels real to me, like just looking at this. And I think it is this other this masculine. Because I kind of feel for some of you, especially if you are this person who's gotten away, I feel like, and you've gotten out of this fantasy, you probably have a lot of fear and a lot of shock of just like, oh my God, how could you? You know, the selfishness is what I can't forgive, you know? Also, when I just said that word forgive, somebody was telling me about this book, and I can't remember much about it, but it was something like the undercurrent of this book was philosophically asking like, who has the right to forgive? Like, who has the right to offer forgiveness? And they were talking about it in like response to our current culture of like certain people feeling remorse for, you know, maybe a certain thing that they did around like November. And so it's like, but they're not asking forgiveness from the people that are like being hurt the most by that. And so, yeah, it's like, who has the right to forgive? Like, how can I forgive? Or like, I don't know, going deeply into, I think that's also, I'm hearing F's, like fantasy, forgiveness. I'm also hearing that 4-letter F word. Like there could have been an exclamation of anger here, or also some kind of like sexual indiscretion that was like a part of the fantasy that this masculine, this like thick fog, he kept this feminine, I think other people around him in certain holding patterns where he was the architect of this, and he controlled this narrative, you know, he controlled that, but he kept everybody here in these like little bubbles is what I'm getting. And he is a puppet master. I don't think he wants to see himself that way. All of this is because he didn't want to confront something in himself, a narcissistic tendency, a selfishness, a weakness, and maybe even a hurt or a fear or a trauma. And I think it's around maybe the feminine being unfaithful, him being not enough or not exciting enough. And I think, again, like reaction formation is what I'm getting, like where he could have accused her of things in his mind, because it's like maybe a morbid playing out of his worst fears, but he did it to somebody else. He did it to somebody he loves, he claims to love very much. He did it to her. He pushed it onto her and didn't protect her. It's this kind of like the feminist phrase of like that men are protectors and providers, but they provide stress and protect their own ego. I feel like that's what's going on here. He provided stress and he protected his own ego, and he's holding people. And this is like not just romantic people or people that he might be involved with schmegulally. This is people like platonic people too. He also, I feel like, blends the lines maybe between like platonic and friendship, and it is harmful and it is selfish, and he does hurt people and break people's hearts by doing that, and by not holding himself accountable, by not restricting his own actions that are selfish and destructive within a community here. He doesn't do that, but he'll have a narrative. He'll have a way of explaining it away. He'll have a context that he kind of couches it in order to make it seem like he's not the bad guy. Yeah, and I heard it again. The Mr. Insincere apology so he doesn't look like the bad guy. That's come through in a lot of readings here recently. But that's Mr. Perfectly Fine. Oh yeah, and so you're Mr. Perfectly Fine. I think that's another structure here of the structure and the fantasy that he's built around himself. I think that there's also a fantasy about him and who he is as a person, and he couches that as like strength. But he doesn't ever want to look like the bad guy, and he's like always perfectly fine. He's always not emotionally involved. And I think it's because he's always in the strategic mindset because of who he is, and because of how he romanticizes his lust is what I'm getting. There's a narrative he tells himself in his mind about his own devil, the devil on his shoulder, about his lust. He might call it intuition. He might call it divine providence. He deifies his lust and his selfishness. He calls it by another name. And that's a part of the fantasy here. And he calls this kind of behavior love. And it's not, because it's like there is love here, but it's not, he doesn't love people the way that he ought to. And I'm saying like karmically, he needs to love his friends platonically. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to sleep with them as well. But that's the poison that needs to be extracted, because a lot of people's hearts have been hurt by this. I think maybe relationships have been destroyed. Communities even, or people that are supposed to be together in community cannot be because of his involvement with certain people, or because there's certain people that won't want to be around this, or, and it feels like maybe if you argue against this, or you say, this isn't okay, then he's very defensive. Yeah, he's very defensive. And I think he plays the victim. He's like, he's like, no, I'm the family man, or I'm the 10 of cups in some way. I'm the pinnacle, or I'm your happiness, or I'm full of joy or whatever. But actually he's full of strife. It takes a lot of energy to kind of keep this up. He's got a fantasy that he tells himself is kind of what I'm getting. So I think that everybody here is getting a different perspective on this like Hierophant energy. So these two could have been married. Or there could have been another marriage here that he was involved in, but it's not what it seems. It's a part of his like strategy or plan. And I think it's because there was a temptation that was put in this man's path, and it was put there by, again, the hand of God. I do think it was like a karmic test or a karmic choice, because it looks like there's a situation where clothes came off very quickly and somebody didn't see this. And it feels like it's this divine feminine or something. It was done behind somebody's back here, like maybe their spouse or whatever. It was in secret. There was a secret like lover situation, and I think somebody got pregnant. And I've been picking up on that energy. And I think he keeps this person isolated and comes in and out. And I think isolated in terms of location, where again, he's holding her in this like stasis of, I just heard power dynamic, but in some kind of stasis of his fantasy. This man uses fantasy to abuse people. That's what it is. He uses fantasy on his victims to keep people under his control, under his mind control is what I'm getting. But it has to do with like, he controls like the narrative of what's like kind of gone on. So, but he's also, because of that, blocked off from his actual empress. And this could be the marriage that he's involved in, or the marriage that he will be involved in, because he may well lose his wife if these two are married, like his actual divine feminine, his actual empress. And the funny thing about this other marriage is that she's this other lady here, or there could even be two other women, but I think it's one here. she shows up here as like queens. So I feel like there's a certain amount of respect here, but she never quite tips over to the Empress because she's really not his like love. She's not his Venus. There's no fairness here. This is a karmic relationship because she's not treated like Venus. And Venus rules over relationships and its fairness and its equal conversations. And I don't think she's included in the decisions. And but there's like a time buildup over here and a routine around whatever this is. And I can see that this was like it's like devil energy, like going in for some kind of impulse. And it feels like clothes came off very quickly again here. Or it could have been like a new beginning that was like started up. So for some of you, this is somebody coming back from the past, but it was behind somebody's back here. And it was this devil choice temptation. It's like the tempting of Jesus on the Mount kind of a thing. And it led to a loss. And it led to separation is really what I'm getting between him and like his actual soulmate, the person he's actually meant to be with. And instead he's settled. I'm hearing he's settled for karmic energy within himself and therefore externally because he cannot admit who he is and what he's done. And it's a betrayal. He can't just simply say what this is. That was a betrayer. That was a betrayal and I am a betrayer. He has a whole weird fantasy around it. That's part of the karma here. And that's what's bound him. I don't think it's bound this feminine because I think that she has, even though it was hard, she kind of said when spirit started to put little crumbs in her way of like, I'm seeing like Alice in Wonderland kind of crumbs though. Like the eat me, drink me, but instead of making her big or small, it like made her lucid, like more lucid. Like a little bit at a time. But it was like as she was moving further and further away from him, as she was like on her own turf, on her own ground. And I think because they are genuinely soulmates, and that's so unfortunate because what a heart-wrenching experience to be tied to a man like this. She feels torn in herself, not because of anything that she did, but because of who she has to contend with. And it's in a way it seems like her greatest love or her somebody who should be her biggest advocate, her strongest protector in a real sense, not in this weird fantasy bullshit, has become her greatest enemy, has become her greatest op, has become her greatest abusive relationship. And I don't think that he laid a hand on her, but I think he beat her worse than she's ever been because he did the thing of like, he made her fall in love with him, or he presented this fantasy and did not do the work of actually becoming a man, actually becoming the guy that he knew was her equal. And I think the guy he promised her on some way, shape, or form that was promised, or he did not update the image of him in her mind. He was not honest about who he was. And that's what it is. It's a lie. But this is a guy who will use every other word. He'll soften it. Well, it wasn't really a lie. No, sir, it was a lie. You're a liar. That was betrayal. You're a betrayer. This is strategy. This is not love. And I'm not saying that there's not love between them, but this ain't it. So he needs to upgrade himself. And I just heard the Beyonce song Upgrade Ya, and that's coming through like on this feminine side. I got to upgrade you. And so I think that she also is, she's nervous because, yeah, and there is a nervousness about leaving the safety of the castle, leaving the safety of the fantasy. But she does kind of know, and she'll go through a period of this where she's like, well, if I leave now I'm seeing this all differently, actually. And I think that's what I'm hearing her say. Now I'm seeing this all differently, actually, once she's out of the castle. So if this is you and you are married to this person and they are genuinely a soulmate, but he will continue to hurt you, the worst you've ever been hurt. And he'll continue to gaslight you and say, well, at least I'm not putting my hands on you, or at least I'm not this or that. This man be honest with yourself right now. He's hurt you worse than anybody's ever hurt you. And he's done it because he's a love and he's genuinely your soulmate and won't hold himself accountable to not harming you in the worst of ways. And when you confronted about it, he can't simply say the truth. He can't use the correct words. He can't match, the words with the image, like a little kid. I'm seeing a little kid like, this is a cow. This is a pig. Like this is a pig, like he can't say I am a pig. Like he can't. And that is what you need in order to start over. And he has a journey that he needs to go on where I think he's got a problem with himself. He worships the wrong part of himself is what I'm getting, the low part of himself. And he just co-signs every bullshit idea that his lower anatomy has. And then he protects himself from it. And he has this intricate way of doing it that just ends up hurting the woman that he loves and the people that he loves really too. Because he's just he'll probably be your worst disappointment, this guy. But he just thinks that he's such a nice guy. This is like very much a nice guy syndrome. Oh, those are those men. I'm not that way. Oh, you're worse in a lot of ways. You're worse in a lot of ways, dude. So she has to wake up from this functioning dysfunction of this fantasy of teamwork, and that this was like going to break the mold, or that he's different, or he's different now. Yeah. And that something here was just an accident. There's something here about like routine, and she is the higher cup. She is. But there's other women here. There's partying, there's deception, there's, this man, I would actually say, can this man be friends with women? No. I think if he's on the road to recovery, I think the answer is no. I think he needs to understand that he uses and abuses women. He frames it as something else. I'm so lovely, I'm so intimate with women, and yeah, the schmex is a part of it, but like, I'm trustworthy. They talk to me. I'm good in conversations with women. Yeah, that's you being a skis. It doesn't come from the right place. So this man is perfectly capable of like being in relationship with women, having conversations and getting himself right up close, but all of it is selfishly motivated. And I don't think I'd trust this man if he's like, I have women best friends, not this guy. He shouldn't have, because he's gross. But anyways, yeah, there's just this fantasy. And really, I think it's buying him time. And I don't think he's actually used that time or is using that time to figure himself out, because I think he's using it to party or to continue his own version of this fantasy. But I kind of am feeling that, yes, this feminine, maybe she bought into some kind of fantasy and she's got her own like karmas to work out. I don't think these two are anywhere near like on the same level of responsible for what's going on here. To me, it looks like this masculine has a fantasy he tells himself about his behaviors and his actions, that he's a friendly guy and that's why he does what he does. It is love. It's care. No, it's not. He's kind of like the worst off, because at least a guy that's an asshole knows he's an asshole. And so, they say the first step is like admitting that you have a problem. This guy is like 10 steps away from even admitting that he has a problem. So it's really tough with him, because you'll think, oh, well, he's almost perfect, And so if he could just, no. You got to look at this clearly. He's at least 10 steps away from even being able to admit the truth to himself of what he is, that he's actually very strategic. He's very strategic. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he actually does not care about the women in his life. He wants sex, and he wants it from everyone. And he doesn't care what yarn he's got to spin. And I bet you this man can spin a yarn. And I'm sure it's fascinating to watch. I'm sure he's good at it. I'm sure the colors are vivid and everything just pops off the page. And it's just such a talent. But that is a talent that absolutely has and will be weaponized against you. Absolutely. And it will continue on that way, because everybody is just so in awe of it, right? Everybody loves this kind of creative, whatever. But he's a milker is what he is. He's good at extracting and not giving. And that is the truth of this man. And you are going to see it before him, because you and every woman around him pays the price. And that's the truth of him. You and every woman around him pays the price of his fantasy. He concocts it. He benefits from it. And this is the choice that he has. He needs to stop fucking doing it, but he's nowhere near being able to stop doing it. So this is probably the most dangerous man that you'll meet, that this feminine will meet, because I think this feminine has, again, she maybe has gotten sucked into abusive relationships in the past, but I feel she learns and like gets stronger and stronger. So this is kind of like maybe the final boss, because maybe you thought you had learned all your lessons or something. Then up comes this guy, and he's so hard to see. And it's because he buys his own bullshit and he thinks he's a good person. And I'm sure he's got many good qualities and redeeming qualities, so long as he doesn't want anything from you. But the moment this man decides he wants something from you, he'll lie to you till the cows come home. So anyways, I feel like you're both getting a different perspective on this Hierophant energy. So if he's married, I think you're meant to get a different perspective on that. I don't think this is real. I think that this is somebody, maybe there needed to be an accord because there was a pregnancy here. But this is a karmic relationship for sure. But if this was your marriage and you're the soulmate and you're kind of getting away from this, I think that you getting a different perspective on this is you realizing that it wasn't real. This guy he's good at spinning a yarn. He's good at, and it sucks because if you try to call him out on it, this guy is nobody drinks the Kool-Aid more than him. And it's because he's so afraid of admitting who he actually really is and dealing with that guy. He doesn't want to deal with that guy, and he doesn't want you to deal with that guy. So that guy never gets dealt with. Okay. I don't know if you heard that, but my cat is in the sink, and that was a tower moment. But yeah, so I feel like, you're getting a different perspective on this Hierophant energy. I don't think he's a Hierophant kind of guy. He's presenting as like the emperor and the Hierophant, somebody in control, somebody strong, but this man can't control himself and won't control himself. And so if you try to call him out on anything, it's just, you're going to be very frustrated. And I think depending on how slick he is with his communication and how slick he is with this defense mechanism, because that's what this is. His fantasy here is an ego defense mechanism. You're going to be left blaming yourself, gaslighting yourself, and contorting yourself, where you're just giving more and more and more, and you just get more and more eroded. But that's not what it's called. It's not called you shrinking. It's not called you being abused, which is what it is. It's not called that. It's called sacrifice. It's called, relationship. It's called partnership. It's called working things out. It's called, look at us, aren't we? So no, this man is sick. And he needs to be alone. I think Spirit is insisting that this man is alone. Because, I'm hearing a line from Emma, the Jane Austen. It's from the film, the new one, where Mr. Knightley, who is amazing, genuinely, but he's talking about Mr. Churchill, Mr. Frank Churchill. And he's a young guy that Emma was kind of thinking she was interested in before she kind of knew the truth about him. And this guy is kind of like this, like he's very attractive and he stands to inherit. And he says, Mr. Knightley says about him, he says in kind of exasperation, he uses everybody ill and they're just so keen to forgive him. And I feel like that's this man. And so you'll have a lot of people come to his rescue and support his fantasy and gang up against you, but it'll be soft power is what it is. Oh, but he did this for me and he did that for me. Oh, he didn't really mean it. And I mean, he doesn't, but this is still messed up. This is still abuse. This is still a messed up dynamic. And he is still all about power and control. He just uses the soft fluff language of Venus and partnership and values in order to do that. And he hides just enough from people, from everybody. And he's doing that to other people. And you'll be frustrated and you'll feel incredibly gaslit, which is violent. And you'll start hating yourself here. And you got to get away from it. You've got to get away from it because you want the steps that you take in the 3D world to match up with the ground beneath your feet. To put yourself in a situation where that's not what's happening is extremely dangerous for you and for everybody else, but everybody's got to learn their own way here. He keeps people separate. So there might look like there's a family or there's a community around this guy. He keeps everybody separate. So there's no genuine, meaningful interaction, and he's the puppet master of all of it. This to me looks like a Genghis Khan. I don't know much about Genghis Khan, but it just seems like that. I don't know. Yeah. Anyways. Okay. So I'm going to leave that there. If that resonates, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Bye, guys.